friends, this is the start of my Skoden read-a-thon vlog. I'm currently in the midst of the 7-day reading challenge for that read-a-thon, where the creator Kim has challenged us to read nothing but Indigenous authors for 7 days straight, so that's what I'm doing. I'm currently about halfway through by Alatsoe, which I'm very much enjoying and I'm hoping to finish tonight. I finished I Can Keep This Promise yesterday, and then I think a few days before I finished The Skeleton Man. I really enjoyed The Skeleton Man, and I will definitely be checking out more of that author's work. I think there is something very magical when you come across a middle grade that is just hits that childlike imagination and wonder that is still inside of you as an adult, which this one very much did, but was also a little bit spooky, which I don't normally go for. I am very much a scaredy cat, and so I was hoping that because it was a middle grade it wouldn't be too scary for me, and I was right. It was the perfect level of spooky. The storytelling was really fun. I also really appreciated the depiction of the protagonist's relationships with some of the adults in her life. I think a plot device that I've often seen in media for younger audiences is the setup where the adults or the parents refuse to believe a child when they say something is wrong or something is up, and so the child has to go and fix the situation by themselves, which, you know, classic trope, but I really appreciated how in this book there definitely are a few adults that do not believe our protagonist. However, her teacher is someone who is constantly on her side, constantly checking in with her and reassuring her that she is there to help if she needs it. Believes her when she tells her that something is wrong, and I just found that to be very heartwarming and wholesome to read. I Can Keep This Promise is one that I appreciated, but I don't think I enjoyed personally quite as much as the other two books that I have read so far for this read-a-thon. It is the author's first book, so I will definitely give her that. And also it definitely covers a topic that is very important, and that is the separation of Indigenous children from their families and their communities as a means of control and genocide. And I think it is really wonderful that such a discussion is happening in a book that is marketed for a younger audience, for a middle grade audience, from the perspective of a younger narrator as she sort of starts to uncover some family secrets surrounding that topic. For me as an adult reader, I just found that some of the dialogue felt a little bit stiff, a little bit unnatural, and some of the plotting was but by no means do I think that this is a bad book. I would still recommend it if you have a young reader that is interested in this topic, or you think that this is an important topic that you would like to talk about with your young reader. And again, this is the author's first publication, so I am interested to see what she publishes after this. I have also technically started reading the poetry collection, When the Light of the World Was Subdued, Our Stories Came Through, the Norton anthology that was put together by Joy Harjo of Native and Indigenous poets. So far I am still working on the introduction, but there was a poem that was part of the introduction that it was a good one. So I'm very much looking forward to continuing on with that. If I have time tonight, I think I would also like to continue reading that as well. So that is where I am currently in the Skoden read-a-thon, and I will be taking you with me for the rest of the week. Hello again. I thought that I would give you a little bit of an update before I head out and run some errands before it turns dark at 4 p.m. here. The thing that I forgot about November is that it's morning and then it's suddenly 4 p.m. and the sun is going down. So, hi baby, welcome in. Come on. Unfortunately, I lost my wallet a few weeks ago, and thankfully have gotten most of my cards back, but I do need to get a new library card, so I'll be doing that this afternoon. And then heading into town to finally get my hair cut. It was fine for a while, and then suddenly it reached a point where I was like, okay, this is not fine, and I hate having this much hair in my head, so we're gonna fix that. I honestly don't know how I managed to have long hair ever in my life. So I'll be taking care of that, and then coming home and sitting by the fireplace and enjoying some time with my lovely partner. But as far as reading goes, I finished A Lot's Away the other night and really enjoyed that. I loved all of the different mythical and traditional story elements that were incorporated into that story. I really loved A Lot's Away as our narrator, as our main character. I really enjoyed the very close platonic relationship that she has with her best friend Jay and how they're very supportive of each other. If I was to offer a small little critique, I think I would say that some of the pacing for A Lot's Away was a little bit off for me, but this is the author's first novel and it is a very strong first novel in my opinion, and I will be very excited to follow Darcy Littlebadger's literary career after this. I'm currently about halfway through The Seed Keeper, which again I am definitely enjoying. I think there are certain scenes and certain themes that I'm really enjoying, and selfishly I think I would like to have more of that, but I will have to trust the author to have everything play out in the end. I'm really appreciating the depiction and the theme of the Dakota people's relationship with seeds and plants, and how they are not just a means of food and survival, but they are also a means of story and tradition and connection with something greater than yourself. But I'm going to continue listening to The Seed Keeper while I run errands this afternoon, and I will also take you along with me as well. And I should probably get out of here because it feels like the sun is already going down and it is 3:30 in the afternoon. November. Hello again, my apologies. I've fallen a little bit behind in getting some of the footage together for this vlog. Life happens, but I'm here to talk about the last two books that I read during the 7-day reading challenge for the Skoden read-a-thon, share some of my thoughts, and then also share with you some of the books that I picked up from the library that are also by Indigenous authors that I would like to continue to read in the coming weeks. Let's start with The Seed Keeper. This is a story that is told from the perspective of multiple Dakota women and features the story of Rosalie Ironwing across multiple decades of her life, starting out with her being raised in the woods by her father, who was a Dakota man who taught her the stories and the wisdom of the Dakota people when it comes to the natural world, and then her time in the foster care system as a young adult, navigating environments of ostracization and prejudice, and overall being very isolated from her community until she meets and marries a white farmer from her area and has a child with him, and then for the next several decades spends time working with her husband on the farm, raising their son, and navigating the ins and outs of the ever-changing agricultural business, the implementation of a lot of heavy pesticides and GMOs, their effect on the environment, the trials and tribulations of living in a predominantly white community, and also attempting to pass on some of the Dakota knowledge that her father passed down to her son, and meeting with some resistance with her white husband. I think overall I would say that I really enjoyed this book. It deals very heavily with the idea of fractured identities, especially Rosalie Ironwing's, the reasons why it was fractured historically via her family lineage and in her own lifetime, and then over the course of her life and then towards the end of the book when she is recently widowed and has an adult child, of returning to her childhood home and reconnecting with the Dakota community there and trying to find answers to her family lineage, to the larger question of identity and purpose that she is seeking. I really loved that seeds and plants themselves played a really heavy role in this story, especially in the history and the stories of the Dakota people that are mentioned, the significance of these seeds that have been passed down for multiple generations of Dakota people that have been curated for the purpose of feeding this group in this specific part of the world, how the relationship between seeds and people is reciprocal, and finding true nourishment in the food that is grown from these seeds and also the stories that are told around them. And then the last book that I ended up finishing for the 7-day reading challenge was The Future Home of the Living God by Louise Erdrich. This book, I have to admit, didn't quite end up being what I had expected. We follow 26-year-old Cedar, who is a native adoptee to white liberals in the city of Minneapolis. And it follows her journey of reconnecting with her native birth mother and also struggling to tell the people around her that she is 4 months pregnant. Personally, I think I had expected the apocalypse to start a little bit sooner in this book. It wasn't until about a fourth of the way through that you start to hear whispers about the government being very concerned about the possibility that evolution has started to reverse on itself. And so there's a lot of emergency measures being passed, a lot of questions being asked, people starting to freak out a little bit, and it eventually gets to a point where pregnant women are being taken by their own will or by force to facilities and even jails where they are heavily monitored, where they end up giving birth under heavy supervision, and where the babies that are being born, and often the mothers who are giving birth to them, do not survive the process. I think for me, I ended up liking this book, but I had kind of expected to love it. And I'm still kind of thinking through why that is. I jotted down some of the thoughts that I was having while I was reading it, so I'll kind of reference those. But I think one of the things for me was there were a large number of themes and metaphors that were coming up in this book, but unfortunately, I think I would almost say that a lot of them drowned each other out, or that with your attention being pulled in multiple different metaphorical directions, the story didn't really end up having the kind of bite that I think that it could have, or that I wanted it to. Also, I'm not usually someone that goes for horror novels, but just based on the description of this book, this sounded like it was going to be much more of a horror novel. And don't get me wrong, there are definitely very horrific aspects of this book, but it didn't necessarily feel as unnerving as it probably could have been. And maybe that's just because of the current state of reproductive health and rights in the country that I live in. But I think the horror in this book more so comes from the authoritarianism of the state in putting targets on pregnant people's backs and turning larger communities against them. With this being an apocalypse book, I think I also had hoped or was looking for a little bit more world context, a little bit more of context for the apocalypse. Again, you don't really start to hear about it until about 20 or 25% of the way through the book, and at that point it's just sort of smaller mentions. But I think for me personally, that could have been a great way to add to the tension and the horror of the book if you just had gotten a little bit more context as to what exactly was happening, a few more details about the reversal that evolution seems to be happening, what the effects of that is, and evolution reversing not just on humans but also the plant and animal world around them. Again, overall, I think I will say that I did enjoy this book, but there were definitely parts of me that were playing internal editor as I was reading it, or as I was listening to it rather. I listened to it on audiobook. But it's definitely one that has got me thinking, and also has the potential to spill over thematically into some of my own creative projects. And honestly, I think some of the more influential creative inspiration that I've had in the time that I have been creating is reading things that, one, I really don't like and I think that I could do better, or things that I read where I have that internal editor of, oh, I wish that this had been tweaked, or I wish that this had been played out a little bit more. And I take that and gain a deeper understanding of what it is that I like to see in stories and what really speaks to me and what I'm really inspired by. So I take it as kind of a teaching or a learning moment for myself as a creative. But I could definitely see myself taking some of these ideas or themes and playing with them in a short story, possibly. But those are the books that I read for the 7-day reading challenge. I really enjoyed having this reading challenge to look forward to. It definitely helped me focus on a lot of the books that I had planned to read for this read-a-thon, but also felt like a really immersive dive into an area of literature that I really haven't experienced before, into stories that I haven't heard of before. A reoccurring topic in a lot of the books that I read, both middle grade, young adult, and adult, is this theme of rekindling or refinding community after being fractured in the past, and the ripple effects that that has had over multiple generations, dealing with the trauma that has been imparted on Native communities and that the communities are still dealing with, but also how the history and the stories of communities help give individuals a sense of purpose, a sense of culture, a sense of community. The idea that words and stories and culture have so much power was definitely something that was reinforced in a lot of the books that I read the past 7 days. I think I definitely found some authors that I'm excited to follow their future career, and also some authors that I would like to dig a little deeper into their archive. And then, of course, last but not least, we have a library book haul. I went to return some DVDs to the library the other day, and they had a very nice display for Indigenous Heritage Month of November, and I couldn't resist. The first one that I saw on the display and instantly snatched up was The Peacemaker by Joseph Bruchac. The Skeleton Man that I read earlier this month was one of my favorite reads so far this month. He writes a lot of middle grade but also a number of adult fiction that features Indigenous stories. Joseph Bruchac himself is a member of the Abenaki tribe and is a poet, a novelist, and a scholar of Native culture and history. This, I believe, is a historical fiction novel that is a middle grade story about a young Iroquois boy during the lead up to the creation of the Iroquois Confederacy, and I really enjoyed the first book that I read by Joseph Bruchac, so I'm excited to get to this one soon. The next two are poetry collections that have been on my list for a little bit, the first one being Indian Giver by John Smelker, and then the second one being Post-Colonial Love Poem by Natalie Diaz. I read her first collection when my brother was an Aztec and really enjoyed that a couple years ago, so I wanted to pick this one up. Next is a really cool anthology that I saw, and that is Reinventing the Enemy's Language, Contemporary Native Women's Writings of North America, edited by Joy Harjo and Gloria Bird. This is apparently a collection of poetry, fiction, prayer, and memoir of Native American women, which I'm very interested to get to. I've really been enjoying the Norton anthology that Joy Harjo and other Indigenous authors put together. I'm sorry if you can still hear the dog barking in the background, but the last book that I picked up and I'm really excited about is Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse. This is a book that I saw floating around BookTube pretty heavily a few years ago, but didn't end up getting to. I'm very excited to get to now. I don't know too much about this book other than I think it is a blend of history with a little bit of fantasy, possibly. And I think I would prefer to go in a little bit blind with this book just because I know it was so hyped up and loved a few years ago, so I don't want to go in with too many expectations and just experience it for what it is. So I'm planning on continuing reading a number of Indigenous authors and literature in the next several weeks. This read-a-thon has definitely inspired me to seek out Indigenous authors and poets. I've had such an incredible time experiencing a lot of this literature and poetry. I wish I had found it sooner, I wish I had been exposed to it sooner, but I think it's definitely something that I look forward to incorporating in my future reading plans. But with that, my friends, I think I'm going to sign off and get this video up and posted. Let me know what you're reading in the comments. Are you participating in any read-a-thons this month? Let me know, I would love to hear from you. And if you enjoyed this video, you can give it a thumbs up. That apparently helps. But I hope you all are doing well, and I will see you in my next video.